Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Jackson County Board of Commissioners, today's our work session, November 7th, 2022. As the customary do, I'll recognize our county manager who will walk us through each of these items on our work session agenda. Mr. Adams.
Yes, sir. The first item we do have Ms. Stephanie Edwards and Glenn Upatino from the Casters Chamber of Commerce. Stephanie just called and asked if I could appear before the board with Mr. Upatino to give an update on the ULI project and the Casher Community Collaborative update. I passed out a little bit more concise information. You already had the email and information in the packets, and so I'll just recognize Stephanie and Mr. Upatino.
Thank you, Don.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hello, Commissioners. Thank you for having us. We just wanted to give a quick update and appreciate all the support that we received from you regarding the ULI study that was done and the panel that was done up in Cashers. And there's a lot of momentum, a lot of good things happening, and one of them is this Cashers Community Collaborative that was put together. As you all know, there's a lot of different groups up there, and with a lot of different interests, and we just felt like, again, with the momentum, the positivity with the ULI report, we wanted to keep that going, and we really needed a group to come together. These different folks here, and you can see a bunch of them listed here, the invited participants, and this isn't all of them, but it continues to grow and come together. But we've had several fantastic meetings. The first meeting, we really agreed to work on the things that ULI suggested. And also there were, the parties that would kind of take the lead with those different initiatives. So, again, lots of momentum. And I'll ask Stephanie to maybe say a few words, but just wanted to let you know what's happening and the fact that we are going to continue down this road. And I think what it will also do is just get everybody on the same page up there so that we don't have people wanting to get with you individually, that we can kind of just come together as one community, making it, I think, easier as we move forward on the different initiatives. So, Stephanie, do you have anything?
Thanks. So I would just say that the Cashers Area Community Collaborative is really intended to be, again, an extension of ULI in the sense that it's focused on the implementation, but it's also a very inclusive process, very transparent process. We identified, as Glenn said, the key stakeholders in the area. If you still have your ULI report, there's actually a matrix that was very explicit. And in the early meetings, we said the purpose of this group is to be unified in our efforts, particularly as it relates to funding for the community at large, and also be coordinated. So left hand knows what the right hand's doing. And so what we did agree early on is that kind of these lanes will be maintained by these champions in the community, and they'll be well coordinated as we move forward. And as Glenn mentioned, part of that is so that you as the county and the commission specifically don't have 20 different groups coming to you asking for monies, either from competing priorities or confusing priorities. And we've had great response so far. I would say that the group collectively agreed that land conservation was probably the initial priority to focus on. And then the infrastructure, the protecting the character, the pathways, the housing kind of flows up into that, because obviously you can't develop in the absence of sensitivities to natural resources. So we actually later this week, and Don will be with us for this meeting, we'll have a presentation by the Highlands Cashers Land Trust of their recommendations for a long-term conservation plan. So we look forward to working with you. Anything we can do, and I would guess we will also come back regularly with some updates.
Absolutely.
And leverage the momentum we have, as you said.
But thank you for the support. And, we also have some, if I put on my Cashers Planning Council hat, there's some work happening there too in terms of the UDO rewrite. So just, again, a lot of positive things happening, and we just appreciate the support from everybody. Don, Heather, everyone's just been really great to work with.
planning department.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Any questions? No, it's a great concept, and I really like the idea of this coming together to not compete, but work together. And just not in this realm, but I've said that so many times in other areas of county services where we see community partners coming together. Lots of great ideas from our community, but we need to focus our efforts together where we're supporting each other, not competing, and together we can achieve great things.
Terrific. Well, we'll look forward to continuing our work with you all.
Thank you for coming down.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, yes, and I just wanted to say one thing I really appreciate was that the fact that you really worked to be inclusive. And as Glenn said, you had this momentum after the UDO. And then I've seen over my many years of life, great things start and then peter out. And kudos to you for taking that energy and moving forward. That's really good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. The next item, we do have Mr. Ellis here, our Recreation Director, to talk about the Equinox contract for the Qualo Whittier Park.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. Thank you for having me again. And again, we're working with Equinox, which is a firm that we've worked with several times in a lot of our parks here in Jackson County. It's essentially the same contract that y'all agreed upon for the Casher Splash Pad. Essentially, what they will be doing was construction documents, construction observation, topographic surveys, utility connection plans, and site design and construction documents. Again, like I said, that is something that when we applied for the Part-F grant back in earlier this year, we were approved for that Part-F grant. And part of that compensation, the Equinox contract is for that $98,000 is including in that package that we sent off for Part-F grant approval. So any questions on any of the contracts or anything that's going forward with Whittier Koala Park?
Questions?
Do we have do we have an estimate of what this might cost, or is that jumping the gun?
I think what Equinox did when they first did the scope of service, I'm wanting to say it was right at 1.8 for the total build out.
Oh, there it is.
Yep.
Okay.
A little bit.
$2,013,525. And then there's the $500,000 taken off.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this next section here did have our finance officer, Ms. Fox, put together some information, really just trying to get in front of the board the next items to be discussed, decided upon by the board. So before we jump into the proposed Paula Whittier Park grant project or the Casher's Park or the budget ordinance amendments, what I want to do is first go back over the ARPA and local assistance funding update, just to remind everybody the funds available. And so I'm sitting here doing what I tell. I'm looking at the screen instead of the screen right here. And so really just a reminder to the board, Jackson County did receive $8,534,441 in revenues for American Rescue Plan expenditures at this point. What we've done is, if you remember, we're utilizing what's called the revenue replacement process. So these are not new expenditures. We're using existing expenditures to basically justify the funding. We're taking this funds and putting it into a separate accounting process so that we'll track the expenditures until the $8.5 million is expended. So if you remember, the federal government allowed us to do revenue replacement. In order to do that, we had to come up and show what we're expending the funds for. And so what we've done is just supplanted the wages of our public safety and health department employees. Does everybody follow that right there? Okay. And so what we've done is we've left the broadband match out of these conversations. We are still waiting. You know, as we know, there was an award made by the state, but we still haven't received the proposed agreement between us and the state of North Carolina for the $300,000 match for the over $4 million award that went to charter. So we still haven't gotten all that information. As soon as we get that information, we'll bring it back to the board and discuss it with the board. At this point, I do believe we will be able to be allowed to use revenue replacement versus actual ARPA funds. It's less complicated and less restricted on how to account for those funds. But for right now, what I asked the finance officer to do is to still stay flexible in these conversations. Okay, so that if they do come back and say no, the state says no, we'd rather you use actual ARPA funds instead of revenue replacement funds, then we have that ability to do that. So as you can see at this point, what we're doing is 7.9 million is revenue replacement, and we still have the 600 set aside for the for ARPA. So there's your 8.5 million. If you go down and look at what has actually already been obligated from these funds, you can see the planning for the homeless shelter, the planning for domestic peace shelter, the domestic violence shelter, the construction of the domestic violence shelter. So there's your $2,174,498. If you remember, we got a matching dogwood grant to those funds. The other is the public safety equipment of $1.2 million. And then ultimately, the board just made the decision with the awake, if everybody recalls, obviously. So total commitment is 3.449660 almost. So that remains 4,484,781. So if you scroll to the next page, there's an interesting new grant that the county just been awarded. It is called Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund, LATCF. There are no restrictions on these funds. These are additional funds awarded from the federal government to Jackson County. If you look at the next page, you can see we went ahead and put in there. Darlene provided us what other counties they got, but you can see Jackson County got 246,897 this year, and next year we will get 246,897. So what we're doing is this is under the same vein of funding. So I just went ahead and put it in this pot of monies that we're tracking. So that is an additional $493,794 available for future conversations with this board. So there are a total of $4,978,575. So just giving you an update of that's unobligated funds at this point. We may come back to you if the state allows us to use revenue replacement. Just remember, these aren't additional $600,000. You may see some other things come back to you to where we're actually offsetting these costs with additional salaries so that we don't have to, in essence, we would only follow the state of North Carolina contracting laws versus the federal law. That's the value of using it as revenue replacement versus going through the ARPA. Any questions about these funds?
So the 4.9 at the bottom, uncommitted funds, does that include the 600 in broadband match, or is that?
That removes it from that. So we've already accounted for the 600.
Okay, so that's not including it.
Is that?
Oh,
That's correct, right? Yeah. So that is what's available for new projects.
Don, how come Macon ended up getting almost twice as much as us?
On the on this
Macon
sheet,
County got almost 460,000. We got 240.
do you know how they allocated these funds?
What the criteria was.
It was on the economic impact of the different counties and their ability to fund
I don't know what that means.
the, say, tax values, tax rates. They take all of it into consideration. And how the revenues are coming into the counties.
So if you got more money, that meant you had less ability to get money?
That's correct. And like Swan County, they got more because they have so much federal land.
Well, that's understandable. Why is this tribal consistency, local assistance and tribal, what does tribal have to do with it?
It's the county's working with the tribal units, the tribe, they're not listed on there, but I'm sure they're getting funded from it too.
Probably bring.
They're receiving a separate pot of monies, not,
Oh, I see, it's not based on, because I was thinking Macon County doesn't have Eastern Band.
no, it's,
Okay. They're also getting some money, I see.
so do you think it is part of the, say, the property value of the county? So that's similar to what we deal with the schools in regards to low wealth funding from the state. We get, I guess, penalized, if you want to call it. It seems like we're penalized from the state because we have higher value, and they call that the ability to pay, which they're basically saying that you can raise taxes. And so because of our value, that's going to be part of it, and probably our sales tax revenue too, right?
Okay, that doesn't.
Is there any project, I'm sorry,
No, no.
is there any projects with the Eastern Band and Jackson County that this money that you may be aware of or what might be forthcoming that we can utilize some of that money for in conjunction? And is it possible to consider using some of that money at a Whittier Park?
Yes, we're going to have those conversations actually next, as I'm going to talk to you about the proposed funding of both Whittier Park and Cashers. Okay, because as you'll see, we have our Conservation, Preservation, Recreation Fund, or CPR fund. That fund cannot cover the cost of both of those parks. So yes, we're about to get into those types of conversations.
I also think though that Commissioner Jones has a good point that we might be able to request some money from the Qualla Boundary because this will certainly be a benefit to them as well in that community and so close to that school, which has our largest population of enrolled members in that school.
I don't know. I have no knowledge of what monies they've received, no knowledge of what their future goals are. I have no knowledge. It's just, I think what's throwing us off is because of the name here. They threw that name in there because they're basically,
It's tribal though doesn't mean that we're matching funds or.
No. I understand that.
I mean, they did local assistance to local governments, but they're also provided funding to tribal communities.
It does seem odd how they-
So all we're showing here is that just the wages that we're already utilizing as a way to show that we've expended the fund, the revenue replacement fund for the ARPA funds. These are not new expenditures. This is just a way to account for the revenue replacement fund mechanism that we're allowed to do. This is what frees up general fund dollars so that we have 4.9, really 4.44 available into that conversation, plus the new 493. There are no restrictions on the 493, so we didn't have to do any revenue replacement or anything of that nature.
Yeah, and that just goes back to the question you and I talked about, Don, the other day. Are we setting aside enough money in the broadband category for ARPA dollars that could help us leverage those large matches?
So we will have, again, I can only tell you in general terms now. We'll come back to this board with specifics, but we do have the next potential round of funding. The $600,000 covers what was eligible under our current Great Grant program. Remember, that was the 7.5%. There's only been, really technically, there's been about 4.2 million. That our match would have been around a little over 300,000, but the company agreed to just keep it at 300,000, and that's all the paperwork that's coming through. Well, our county was only eligible for up to $8 million. The state is still trying to go through a second round of great grant funding, and if we were fortunate enough to get a second round, we have the money set aside to do the 7.5% match under the great grant. Now, the new program coming up, which called, if you recall, the CAB program. The CAB program right now, and I'm wanting to get final word from the state, and I think we're getting close to it, but that potential, because of the amount of ARPA monies that we did receive, the $8.5 million, that round may require a 35% match from the counties, from Jackson County. Now, if you still go under the premise of a $4 million project, then that runs, you run that, you got to calculate, about 1.3, 1.4 million. So you could be talking over $1 million of the potential match if we chose to move forward. Now, remember, the CAB program will involve the board and the county much more so as far as priorities and things of that nature. So going to your question about is there enough money, there's enough money right there. Now, we're going to talk about potential other expenditures, but even if you chose to move forward with these other expenditures, there's enough money in there to match the upcoming CAB program if the board chose to do so. Is that?
Okay. I just know that we've made broadband access a priority.
Mhm.
And we've all expressed our concerns about the lack of broadband access, and that is a critical element, a critical utility. And as long as these state and federal grant dollars are available, I would just want to make sure we have an adequate funding set aside to match those grants, because that's very important for our community.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, and one thing that the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners has made that the number one priority as well. And the task force that I'm serving on, they're looking at ways. I mean, the goal is 100 counties connected, everybody connected throughout the whole state, which is a huge task, but it can be done. I mean, we have electricity everywhere. That's the way we're looking at it. So they're working very hard to make sure that these matches don't penalize counties, that the state funding for broadband will fill in some of those gaps. And they're working on that right now, Don. And our next meeting, we're supposed to be getting some information on that as well.
But as of right now, potentially for the CAB program, I just ran it. 35% of a maximum $4 million project would be $1.4 million. So that is potential. That could be our potential, the maximum potential part of our conversation. So if we use the maximum in these next conversations, then we know that we have it covered. Hopefully it could change, maybe reduce, but that's the maximum.
That's true.
So just wanted to bring everybody up to date as far as the available funds, how it's being accounted for, and really just reiterating to everybody that we are accounting for all of these ARPA dollars and these new grant dollars coming in from federal government, that whatever decisions this board has made makes on these funds, that is transparent and accounted for.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the next conversation would be the proposed Paulo Whittier Park Link project. So a couple of things has come before this board. One is we did the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund agreement, which was, we proceed forward. We still have to design the park and go out to bid, and the board still has to award the bid and things of that nature. So there's a lot more final decisions to be made in this process. But ultimately, once you start spending these funds, ultimately you have committed to the part of rules, the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund rules, and we have to account and budget for them. If you go back and look, this is the proposed budget of the original part of grant. of $2,013,525. I do want to scroll to this next page because this is the actual project cost submitted to the Cardiff grant application. You're going to notice the $1,963,525. That's different. It's different by $50,000 because for whatever reason, when this was sent in, the 50,000 was not added to this overall number. That 50,000 is less than 5% of. It's actually less than for contingency. I do recommend us keeping in a contingency for this project. So the reality is, when you add all these numbers up, they actually add up to the $2,013,525. Paul was okay with that when Rusty did go back and talk to him about it, and we're over matching dollar for dollar. What they require is a dollar for dollar match. So this project overmatched that $500,000, so it's irrelevant to them the amount of money over the one-to-one match. So they're okay with everything. So the proposal is, this is the original budget. This would be the grant project ordinance itself. Ultimately, what you would look at is $1.5 million potentially out of the CPR fund, $500,000 from the Park and Recreation Trust Fund for a $2,013,525 budget. The $1.5 million. I also had Darlene go back and revisit our Conservation, Preservation, Recreation Fund, and that is the amount of money we have available at this point. That is the total amount of money that we have available. So if you chose to move forward and utilize CPR fund, then that would leave $12,787. For next year, we'd put another $500,000 in there, and then that would be that's our continuous contribution to that fund, and then that's what would be made available for other conservation projects and things of that nature. So at this point, that would exhaust the entire CPR fund. If you recall, if you go back and look at your February, when we did a budget work session, there were basically a couple of funds that the board was looking at. And if you remember, we were going to look at some small projects, things of that nature. We had general fund availability, and we had CPR availability. So the choices here would be to either fund this out of CPR or fund this out of the general fund, or ARPA. Okay, because if you recall, we ran out of time. We didn't really talk a lot about ARPA at our budget planning session back in February. That's because we were still working on the details and all of that. So the reality is, for either of these projects, the three funds that we're talking about is our CPR fund, our general fund, or ARPA, which I just showed you what the ARPA funds were. And so what I'll do is I'm going to go through the next project, and then this will allow us to have conversations, because I'm going to kind of summarize everything, and then really it is just a matter, if you choose to move forward, which funds to take the money from. So if you went to the proposed Cashers Park project ordinance, what that is that ends up being the original master plan up there was about 1.9 million, I believe. What this does is this proposal basically does site preparation, does sidewalks, pathways, does wayfinding signage, the tennis court. We just put tennis court, but that's the tennis court, football court. Picnic tables, trash cans, benches, general planning, splash pad, and then architectural engineering. You remember that's the contract that was just approved, the 132, and then some contingency. So the proposed contingency project cost would be $1,111,000, and then understanding we have to design it, go out to bid, get bids, open bids, and then that's when you truly know the cost of the project. At this point, the only place to take the money, there is no money in CPR fund. You see here that it could be general fund. Well, general fund, when you sit here and look at this, you could call that the ARPA, or you could call it the general fund. Because remember, when we do revenue replacement, we're tracking it as ARPA, but it's technically general fund dollars. That's the reason she didn't put ARPA funds there, because we've converted all this money to our general fund dollars. Okay. So one proposal could be to take that $1 million out of the ARPA funds. But again, it could be ARPA, general fund dollars, excuse me, or CPR. As you can see, the CPR fund would only pay for one of these projects. So if you continue with the Cashers project, then your only choices really is general fund or ARPA to pay for the $1 million. And so if you scroll down and take a look at what I did at the bottom of this is basically the same information that you had at the beginning, the ARPA revenues. And if you just go to the bottom, instead of having the 4,978,000, if you took this project to the ARPA funds, you would have 3.866. Does that? So you could flip it. You could turn CPR. You could put that in CPR, put CPR over here, but it's really three funds we're talking about paying for these. So if you chose to move forward and put aside $1,111,000 ARPA funds for this Cashers project, then you still have the almost 9 million available for future conversations. And
So,
then,
I know we already signed the architectural agreement for the Cashers project.
correct.
You showed those dollars at 132,464. And we had before us today the proposed contract for Equinox on Koala Park.
Correct.
So we'll soon sign that one.
That's the 98 that I'm
Correct.
pointing at in this.
So from a time standpoint, when do we expect to even be in a position to put these out to bid?
Oh,
To get cost estimates? I mean, are they going to occur in this budget year, or will it be in next fiscal year?
well, actually, I think they're going to go in the next fiscal year. Next fiscal year. Yeah. Yeah.
If we go in contract with Equinox for a year, it'd be about the same at the end of next year.
These are conversations that we're having that could literally occur in next fiscal year, almost a year from now.
Yeah, the only thing that I would, as we proceed forward, I always, whether the board move forward with these ordinances or not, we always have to keep these amounts. I would always keep these amounts
Reserved.
reserved on our radar because I'm assuming you're not having me spend a couple $100,000 on architect fees without some intention of us seriously considering these projects. And so at minimum, a couple of things the board could use to move forward with this. Minimum, what I do need is by signing off on this agreement and the other agreements, then Darlene needs to come back before the board and she would put in where we're putting 98,000 and put in 132,000 in some type of budgetary format because we're going to be spending that money this year. So that's the thing that will not wait till next year. Right. Is all that monies. And so I can tell you the only thing about this 98,000, if the board chose not to move forward with the project as a whole, I do need to add about $10,000 to that 98,000, and it's going to be for some other bidding costs associated that's not in that contract. I was going to take it out of that contingency, right?
Well, and I think the point I was trying to make by asking those questions was that if we did decide to authorize these two proposed grant project ordinances, then all we are doing is designating those funds, putting them into reserve. The actual expenditure may be at least a year away from now. Mm-hmm. And who knows what happens over the next year. The federal government may decide to give us another $500,000 that could supplant some of these other funds. So I think it puts us in a good position. What I like about personally, and this is just me as one commissioner speaking here, I know we've always talked about ARPA funds and one-time use for impacts to our community that are long-lasting. And yes, this proposed Cashers Park plan, I think, fits very well with the scope of what, at least conversations I've had about the impact to our community. It's an outdoor recreational component. It involves health, it involves recreation, it involves several lasting impacts that improves the quality of life for the people in the southern end of the county. And I think that is no better way that we could spend those funds and it be something that would be so long lasting, not only from a physical standpoint, but from the health and improvement to quality of life for those residents. It would be huge.
And I totally support that idea, Chairman McMahon. And I think the mental health component, which I know you included with your health statement, we know the outdoor activities, no matter what age a person is, that greatly improves their mental health. And this is one person speaking, I would like to see us designate both these projects with ARPA money and have plaques put up that, like the CCC used to do and WPA used to do, saying this was done with Jackson County ARPA money, that shows the long-lasting legacy of what this board was able to do with that money we got from America Recovery. Just a thought.
So if the board agreed with that, then what you would do under this project ordinance is we would have, we could split that in half, or however you wish to do
Or
that.
save it to
Because remember,
some of
it's-
the other parks.
It's saving, CPR it stays in the fund.
Right.
So what this is doing at 1.5 is exhausting that entire fund. If you took half of that, just say use the 750, and then half from the CPR fund and half from ARPA, it does what you're talking about doing. And then it also leaves money in the CPR fund for other projects.
And that was my concern, taking the CPR fund down to $12,000.
I think
Because I don't know what on the radar with the Greenway. Is there a piece of property that we could acquire? Is anything on the radar with park within the recreation for the county needs? So it just makes me a little nervous going down to 12,000, because something could a piece of property could open up that we would want to entertain inquiring to improve that. But Greenway is the one that pops in my head.
Well, and I agree with you there, and I think if we just left all the CPR money there, that gives us more flexibility. And I know from what you've said, Don, this, the way we're accounting for the ARP money, it's general fund replacement. But if we took both these projects from that ARP money and then left that other, if land became available to increase the Greenway or improve some parks that need a little extra something, we would have that money available for those other recreation projects.
So if you
I mean, it's a thought.
So what I just put on the screen is the ARPA monies and the other funds minus the Cashers Park. And then ultimately, if you chose to take the Qualla Whittier Park out of this, at one point I mentioned half, which is 750, but you were saying all. So you're really talking about taking additional 750 to 1.5 million out of that 3.8. That's the discussion. I'm trying to get you to the numbers. So that can sustain the 1.5 million hit too. And then that would leave all the money in the CPR funds for Greenway and for other things.
That number was brought to 2,353,359.
Good.
Remaining monies,
Yeah.
Yes,
Well, that'd be good, wouldn't it?
and then you'd have the CPR.
can the CPR monies be used for other things beside recreation and parks? No, so we got to.
No. So that's really what you as a board have to. You're taking it all or half. That's honestly, if whatever number you choose to take out of ARPA, you would take it out of the 3.866.
We can think about it.
Will this go on the agenda for next meeting? Is that planned?
It can. I mean, or we can Table it, either one. I mean, it's up for our discussion. Commissioner Stradlin, Commissioner Deeds, y'all want to offer any comments? Well, it's like that's old saying. What's the 6 one way, half a dozen
I
the
was
other?
just gonna say that same thing.
I mean, it's
It is kind of.
we're taking the same money out of the same pot, but it's you're reaching with your right hand on one time and your left hand on the other. It's the same pot, the same money.
Right.
That half and half sounds 6 one, half dozen the other, reasonable. You know, leaving a certain amount of money in a CPR fund for, which would be 600-ish thousand, would be significant for a project, or you get a project started, and in 6 months, we're gonna add another 500,000, approximately 6 months, we'll add another 500,000 into that CPR fund.
So basically the same bag is gonna be in here.
But the CPR funds can only be used on the parks. So we need to keep that money in doing the work on the parks. Strictly. That way we can take funds from other places and use it up somewhere else, you know? Does that make sense?
So you like the idea of taking 50%?
Which would leave approximately 600,000-ish in the CPR fund for something we can't see coming.
And I think going to Commissioner Woody's original comment, a vast majority of the funding would be, overwhelmingly would be supported by the American Recovery Funds.
Oh, good.
So I think
Okay.
it still would
We could
qualify
still-
to do
okay.
what you were
Yeah.
wanting to do,
Thank you.
and the reason why you were suggesting that it all be, that fund helped assist in making this possible.
Then I feel comfortable with that. And the reason I'm saying that is because I feel like we have said, as you mentioned from the very start, that we wanted to do something with that money that was sustainable and had a positive impact for generations to come. And those projects do. And that's very important, I think, for us.
And I can tell you, leaving the 750 in a CPR fund, the numbers that I know that's been internally being discussed about some of these projects, that's within the amount of monies that are needed to proceed forward with. I know with some of the, hopefully proceed forward with some of the conversations being held with maybe the Greenway and things of that nature. Go ahead and let this board know so it's not surprising. The only other two park conversations that I know that potentially could be coming back to you, and will still fit within these numbers, well within these numbers that we're talking about, is that at some point the proposed, do you recall the Webster Park conversation that was brought up at our budget process last year? There has been some state funds allocated towards that, about $90,000. I've asked Rusty to update the numbers for that park, and that'll be a conversation to be held with you in the next couple of months. So if you recall, the last numbers we had total of that park was, if you did an accessible playground, I believe it was around 225 to 250, somewhere in there. And so we got a $90,000 grant that could help with the pavilion and things of that nature. So I was going to come and have that conversation with the board. Doesn't mean we're going to full 225, but I'm just giving you the range of numbers. I'm just getting everything updated. But there's a $90,000 grant that was awarded for that. Hadn't been officially, I don't think, notified, but it has been awarded. The other thing too is I'm trying not to get in front of some of these groups. I feel necessary to let you know as a board that could be coming back. I've instructed Chad Parker to go look at what we know as the Prentice property. So DOT has the land that's surrounding that. If you recall, DOT Our planning department, Mr. Poston, and Recreation, been working with DOT to get the land donated around that property. Well, that has taken place here within the last month. And so what I've asked Mr. Parker to do is to go ahead and just get some cost estimates of what it would take to clean that property up. So we're not necessarily turning it into a park, but if we clean the property, and what I mean by cleaning the property up, I mean removing the house and cleaning it up and things of that nature, then ultimately, maybe it'll be a usable piece of property, not necessarily as a full-blown park, but not much different than, the access to the property we've got in Dillsboro and things of that nature that can, at least somebody can just park there and access the river. And so those are the only two major projects that I know that are coming. And so within these, whether it be CPR or remaining ARPA funds, things of that nature, it all falls well within the monies available.
So it sounds like the consensus is that we divide the funds and to do somewhat of a 50-50. Bring that back. Does anybody object to that?
No.
That's what I'm hearing, so. Okay, well, we'll let staff prepare those proposed ordinance amendments and with the showing the funding from the different sources.
And for what it's worth, I'd entertain, in the future, as we talk about that Webster Park, that I'd say, gosh, that sounds perfect for the CPR fund, that balance that we have, we'll
Yes.
have in there.
Sure.
And along with that 90,000. Did the town of Webster also get monies, or is that the 90,000 reference?
So it's a combination of Webster elected officials lobbying for the funds, along with staff being involved with it, and along with our COG. So the way it's worked out is got funded for this project, but it's funded through our Council on Governments. And so this property is owned by the school system, but controlled by the county. And so although there's $90,000 in there for the pavilion, there's other things we have to do to that property, like put a net up and things at a minimum that I'm going to come back to you and say, well, minimum, we need to do these additional things to the property to make it work. But then we'll have an array of other things. So yes, there was I believe some of you were at the event with Senator Corbin and so.
And I
it's a
think
lot
this
of
could
lobbying.
be, though, another opportunity to do what Gail has suggested on the other two parks. If we partnered, use the money in combination to where it qualifies for another one of these plaques.
Yes.
So that provides those in
Shows
different parts of our community,
Different parts of our
county.
community. I love that.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
we'd have one in the south and one in the north and one in the central. And that, I think that would show all of the community that we were thoughtful and inclusive.
So if I understand correctly, you are willing to entertain these project ordinances at our next meeting, and that we are looking to split the cost of the cashier's clerk between ARPA funds and CPR funds, which would leave approximately $750. Somewhere is 1.5 million, so it'll leave over 700 in the CPR fund. Just so you know, I just wanted to show you at the end here is the different things you will see: public safety equipment, awake, Cashers Glenville Recreation Project Fund. You can see, obviously this will change a little bit because we're going to fund half of this with CPR, but this will be one of the budget ordinance amendments that'll come before you, along with those project ordinance amendments or project ordinance funds that'll come before you. I think the only thing that's going to change is the Cashers Glenville, that 1.1, correct?
And the designated.
Oh, yeah, and the designated future appropriation because that'll reduce by that amount.
So if we do the half and half on both, out of the ARPA money, what does that take? Did you say 2.8 left, 2.3 left of ARPA money for future projects?
That's good.
Wait a minute. Before we move on with that, let's double check that. Yeah, it's actually more. But that, that 2.3 was taking 1.5 out of that. So what is it now? It'd be 3
3
million.
million left, okay.
The 2.3, that was, we're taking all of it out of
I
it.
got you. I'm with you.
Okay,
Okay.
well, thank you. Any,
Any other questions about any of these project ordinances? This other business?
next item we have is we do have the proposed third amendment to the agreement for our ambulance services with Harris. This is really to memorialize the decisions were made previously in regards to adjustments due to salary increases. Darlene, you've gone through the numbers and all the numbers are correct. So ultimately, you can see income guarantee payment shall be 1.679 per year, installments 139,949.42. That memorializes decisions previously made by the board. And just a reminder to the board, we do a shore up at the end of the year. So if revenues come in higher than expected and our expenses are less, then they actually do pay us back. If this is funding more than what was anticipated, and we've actually gotten monies back several years in a row.
Any questions about this one? We'll put it on the next agenda then. 4B,
I was letting everybody know that Legislative Goals Conference is coming up, and it's not timed very well, but it's November 16th through the 18th. And so if anybody's interested, please let Angie know. And
it's
then,
gonna be November 16th. through
Yes,
the
and I
18th?
really would love want somebody else to go this time. That's why I didn't answer you, Don. I've got 3 things scheduled those days. I'm teaching at Cullowhee Valley School, and I have several meetings. It's
You know,
just.
normally this is held in January.
I know, and the reason for the change, they mentioned at our last board meeting, was because they wanted this in place before the next legislative session. And when they do it in January, the session's already started. So they felt it would be much more impactful to, at the very start, be able to hand these over in January when the legislators come in, and there'll obviously be some new ones because of the election, and say, these are the goals that county commissioners throughout the state have endorsed. So that's why it's moved. But for me personally, it's just a really hard time to go. And if anyone else could go, I would appreciate that. But I know it's probably hard for you as well.
I'd like to go.
It's in
It's a
Raleigh.
little short notice for me.
Well, I
I
know.
know it is in Raleigh.
Well, we have another meeting, you know, obviously we'll vote
Okay.
on this. So let's think about it, look
Think
at your
about it.
calendars
Yeah.
and talk about it and see
Okay.
if it's an option.
Yeah.
And then we'll take it up potentially at the next meeting.
And I will say this, just the ones that we looked at the board meeting, broadband's number 1. I mean, I'm not trying to minimize the importance of this meeting, but we would be voting with everybody else. Pretty much, number 1's broadband. And, you know, that's, I think, what we feel as well, don't we? So, just to let y'all know.
Okay.
that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Commissioner Deets, any other projects or things you want to talk about from board level? No? Okay. Commissioner Woody, anything else?
No.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Strickland?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't have anything either. Mr. Manager, anything else at all?
I would just like to wish everybody good luck tomorrow, and I look forward
Everybody go vote.
to go vote. Absolutely, it's
Thank you.
it's good luck to everyone, and I look forward to working with the seated board come December.
With that being said, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.